this first section of the afternoon is all around Brexit and the effect on Brexit on construction, and we'll keep it around construction, but I'm sure we will move off of that into the wider worlds of both perhaps property and facilities management. But just out of interest, show of hands, how many of you guys are actively involved in thinking about Brexit from your own business point of view at the moment? Yeah, only about half of you, which is interesting. So what I'm going to do first, I'm going to get the panel. You're probably fed up seeing Jason at the end there for you, regularly appearing on a platform near you. I'll get the panel to introduce themselves and perhaps say a little bit about what their businesses are doing more strategically around preparing for Brexit. And then we'll sort of break out into a general discussion around more specifically the area of construction, and we'll be opening the floor up pretty much immediately, so we want to make this as interactive as we can, whether it's just questions, comments, opinions, whatever it might be, and I'm sure there'll be a few out there. So Jason, let's start with you.
Okay, so most obviously know Jason Clark, UBS. My role is engineering and facilities management and property projects and mission critical facilities. For UBS in the UK in particular, the UBS franchise is strong. It's not going anywhere. We're not moving people en masse. Our senior leadership have already stated that publicly. There are some works going on, and most of which is under NDA, but there are works going on to understand if there is some talent that needs to move, but we're talking 100 people, we're not talking thousands and thousands. So, and if there's any impact on things like data centres and things like that, but generally the brand is strong, the franchise is strong in the UK, and it will continue to be so for the mid to long term future.
Thank you. David?
Hi, I'm Dave Mills. I'm head of group property at Associated British Foods. We're probably one of the more unusual businesses. We're a diversified group who are very decentralised. So my role is advising most of our operational businesses, excluding Primark, on what their property needs are. And I don't know whether you know, but we've got brands such as Kingsmill, Patak's, Twinings, multiple brands globally. The Brexit situation, I think, is quite interesting. A lot of our earnings are overseas, and I think we came out yesterday with our annual results, and we're fairly neutral on Brexit, I think, generally. We are looking at Brexit and what the implications are around our business. That's important to us, but we're looking at mainly on the individual business unit level, and what's it going to affect, and how will it affect all the businesses. So that, when you're dealing with food standards, obviously it goes all the way through our supply chain, as well as our sales and marketing. So it's quite a major operation on that. But I think the chief exec came out yesterday and said that actually we'd welcome a transition agreement. Other than that, it's business as usual for us.
Thank you. And Gareth?
Hi, I'm Gareth Hughes. I'm Procurement and Property Director at Whistle. Whistle is a logistics, packet, parcel and mail business. So we are fortunate to benefit from the e-commerce boom, but we are largely domestic, so you would assume therefore that we're quite safe. But we are doing quite a bit of work because we still need to import machinery, spare parts. One of our biggest cost lines is fuel, and therefore exchange rates has quite a big impact on fuel. So the main areas, I suppose, of concern that we're looking at the moment are supply of labour, because we have a fear that the blue collar community, which we rely quite heavily on Eastern European workers, could be disrupted. Securing costs through forex deals on major investments, or pulling those programs further forward so we know what those are. And the other piece is just making sure that we understand what could happen with the supply chain. And this is the bit unknown, because lots of people say, well, we don't know, we're talking to people, we're making plans. but the actual readiness isn't clear. People are probably less ready for Brexit than they are GDPR, which says something. So we're just trying to talk to the supply chain to understand what that might look like, and the key risk areas, just thinking about contingencies.
Cool. So based on that, it appears nobody's particularly worried about it, so we may always go out and get another cup of tea. And it does raise the question, really, whether or not Brexit more generally is going to be as much of a wrench for our industry in particular, and for industry more widely, or that it's something that the news and the news channels are built up to such a point and such a frenzy, everyone's worried about it, but in the background, businesses are just getting on with it. My view is that businesses in the UK have always been very good at dealing with change, whether it's recession or whatever it might be, and there's always a bit of a worry that things are going to work out, but they always do work out, and I think we're very good at sort of managing through that. So I do wonder how much of a wrench this will be for us. I guess there are issues with exchange rates, as the guys are talking about. There's issues potentially with labour and resource, and then you've got the sort of the import-export situation. So just thinking about your specific day-to-day jobs and roles, what do you think? Are you seeing any change in that in terms of either the cost of material or cost of labour or availability of labour, or are you worried about that at all? Maybe David, kick off there.
Well, the projects we're looking at, we've now got a new line in there, which is currency contingency. If you look at when we've been looking, we do build quite a bit, and obviously some of that material is imported. So we're now having to manage that currency fluctuation inside our business cases. Once the contract is placed and you've hedged it, you're fine. But it's until, I don't know about other people, it takes us a few months to get to the place where we can place orders. So your original business case can vary significantly. I've seen business cases that have been varying by 5 to 10% through the cost of through the exchange rate movement, which that does have an issue. That does cause an issue for everybody. But if you manage it properly, I know on one of them we recently switched supply to China, and quite frankly we should have done it in the first place because it saves us 20% on a certain material. But the only problem there is obviously you then got into the standards, and what happens is that any issues, obviously you're getting your supply from China, and for what we were getting supplied over there was a unique product. So let's hope it comes back correctly, ready for installation. But that's really the main impact we've seen. The other issues, because obviously I've got another side of what I do, which is property development and land development. And what we're now seeing in the house building is that the house building is up, and we've got consent for 2,000 houses in the UK in the last couple of years, or about to, if assume we don't go to appeal in January and 1. And what we're finding now is that the way houses are constructed, due to the constraints on the sort of labour market and the speed, is changing. So we've had approaches from people who want to buy large sites off us. So one's got their own factory where they prefabricate the house, it's a wooden frame house, and they bring it on site and they just do the foundations. And they've cut the construction cost down by 6 months, I think it is, by doing that. And another one actually wanted to build their own prefab housing factory on site so that they could just roll them out and place them on the foundations. And I think that is partially to do with the labour supply and the lack of skills, forcing them in, as well as getting the actual delivery time down. Because obviously the government is one of those is certainly funded by the government and backed by the government, and the HCA to get their 300,000 new houses target done. You've got twin factors there. One is our own demand, one is the potential shortage of labour, meaning that we can't build them quick enough. That was around before Brexit. And I think that Brexit is just going to exacerbate that by the uncertainties in the labour market.
Jason, what about your world?
Yes, certainly seeing changes in raw materials. So when we're buying big electrical infrastructure packages, that the price is only fixed for a very short time. Also seeing some late notice delays coming in, and you kind of wonder whether the manufacturers are kind of holding back and bulking up some of their orders to get better kind of value through their supply chain. So we recently just a piece of equipment was suddenly 12 weeks delayed without any prior notice. So we're seeing that type of behaviour. More in general, I think we were lucky. We hit our new facility at the very low point in the market, so prices were low, and through the life of that project we started to see the market change, and prices started to go up. There was a shortage of labour just because of the volume of work, and I think Brexit or not, we've got a massive shortage of skilled labour in the country. So are we seeing the results of that mixed in with Brexit? But there was certainly some buoyancy in the market, and I think the decision to go or stay came at that high point in confidence. And I think, for me, almost the question's much too late. The damage has been done in that uncertainty, and I wonder whether in the next year or 2 or 3 we'll start to see that drying up of commercial and civil projects. I think we've already seen it from the market data at the moment shows there's, for the first time we've gone that below the 50%. We've gone into the negative. So I think we're already seeing signs of it. It's just that we're still buoyed by the projects that were already planned. But contrary to that, hotels, housing is still buoyed by the obviously right to help to buy schemes that's driving housing still up, and obviously hotels with the tourists, with the weak pound, we're seeing lots more tourists and lots more demand for hotels.
What about Whistle?
I think we're seeing it through some consumer behaviour. So cost of living as a result of inflation is rising. Somebody mentioned earlier that there's no more pay rises, so disposable income in the pocket is reducing. So the bit that isn't clear is e-commerce and the volumes there. So to be fair, we've seen, I think, about 18% increase on last year's activity, which is positive, but it's probably below our own stretch targets. So all the indications and the research suggest that e-commerce will continue to grow, probably at the expense of the high street. But I think the biggest point, and you made it, is there's no certainty about what this means or what this will look like. So at the moment we have lots of research and lots of people have carried these out. So KPMG, Deloitte, various bodies, and there's a much more interesting presentation on this coming later, so I don't want to share too much. But there is research there which suggests, potentially 40 to 50% of EU workers, and there's 2 million in the UK officially. 40% of those could elect to leave, depending on the outcome of Brexit, which has a serious impact on our service industry, our manufacturing industry. So that fear piece, I think, is the biggest worry that we have.
Let's right out to the floor. I don't know if we've got any microphones anywhere. We have. Anybody want to ask a question, make a comment, observation, throw anything out there?
I think what we'll find is that everybody always focuses on all the negatives. Not that it's my field, but even though I'm mainly services and what have you related, I've had 2 people I know in the last 2 weeks phone me up and say, "Carl, do you know anybody that is looking to buy commercial property or looking to sell commercial property in London, circa certain brackets, and we're talking sums of money, 600, 800 million euro." And they're saying to me, "Do I know anybody that wants to sell commercial property?" And this is coming from Australia.
So I think
there are I think there are people looking at people moving out, but I think there's people looking to move in as well.
So the interesting dynamic there is where you have heavy footfall and premium retail sites, those will continue to have the demand because the footfall is there, and actually the cost of those rents is going up. So tick that box, but retailers are probably going to have to focus more on the retail experience So it's not sufficient just to go into a shop. They have to create an experience that gets people in rather than buy online. That's the differentiation. But if you move away from those premium retail areas, people are moving out of town and away from the high streets. So that's fine, and there probably will be those upsides, but elsewhere I think it's more, again, it's the uncertainty, and uncertainty is never good for any business, I guess, because people are more cautious. Yeah.
Yes, I think London as a capital is still one of the cheapest capitals for residential or commercial. So hence why you can see there's more and more interest from overseas investors. We know certainly in the residential market, I mean, Chinese guy buying it off plan, never moving in, just sitting on it as an investment. So yeah, it's still a cheap capital.
It is. You've got to remember, there's a lot of opportunism, whatever it is, out there, with just the currency movement. So you've got guys coming in from Australia. You know, it was over $2 to the pound just before Brexit. I think as of yesterday, 171. So you know they're making a 15% return straight away. You know, it goes the opposite way because unfortunately I've got I'm working on some major property developments over in Australia at the moment, so it's not helping me and my profits. But you know, it's had that direct impact. But you've got to, the property market over here is seen as a very safe haven. So at the moment you've got a weight of money coming in for the pension funds. You've got the overseas money, and you've got people trying to, looking for places to get a return. And if you look at the industrial market at the moment, we've been looking at something, and I think we're on one of the schemes we're looking at. We've been quoted around 4.5%. Index linked.
4.5% I've been told is about what's expected.
It is, but you've got to remember that the parallels happening in Europe as well. We're looking at European investments, and we're getting the yields to historic lows at the moment. In a lot of places. So there's two impacts here. One is the money coming into the UK, taking advantage of the currency, and the other one is it's another wall of money coming out at the moment, but it's not necessarily bank led. There's a lot of equity out there.
Oh, this is all private money. This is not, and it's all off market stuff.
Oh yeah, I can see why they want to come out of Australia, because I know we've got a site we're about to put under offer at double what it was worth 2 years ago. Which is great news. But also you've got the Chinese. If you're a Chinese person going to Australia, you can only buy a new flat. You can't buy an existing stock, can you? So you're going to come to the UK, where it's a lot more flexible, a lot more tradable, rather than going to Australia. And we tried marketing an Australian scheme in China and got nowhere. No.
I think that that investment in London in particular, and hopefully some of the other major cities in the UK will benefit from it as well. Also, it keeps the industry busy. It's new money coming in. It may go full circle, which means we struggle with resource again because of it. But certainly the consultants and contractors that I talk to around London and home counties are not. They're always worried about where the next 6 months worth of jobs are going to come from. But that's always been the case, particularly in the fit-out market. The pipeline is rarely more than 6 to 9 months, and you think it's going to go quiet, and suddenly a few sales of big office developments in London, and there's a few major fit-out projects out there again. So I think that's all good for the market. Any other views? Anyone want to say anything about Brexit?
So I think that's a really valid point, is that the contractors are really rather resilient little lighters, and they were already diversifying. So where their fit-out market was prominent, they then started to focus on hotels and other revenue sources. They're looking at opportunities to move with clients. So if clients are moving outside of the UK, they're looking to facilitate that move and facilitate those builds in parts of Europe. They're also looking further afield in places like the States, where they're now seeing huge opportunity and competition is maybe less. And you see some of the global players are going into areas that they traditionally would never work in, but that's become one of their main revenue sources.
Yeah, it's not all doom and gloom, because there's quite a lot of Far Eastern investment in the UK at the moment because of the e-commerce market. So I think the average spend per annum is £4,600 online, which is quite a lot when you think if that's the average. So I think my wife might account for quite a lot of the rest of it. But that is attracting investment because we have, I guess, two issues. So the high street is becoming vacated, but there is a shortage of warehouses that can support the e-commerce demand, but also data centres. So data centres is a key piece.
Well.
Yeah. So the infrastructure to support this boom and this growth isn't there at the moment.
And so I just wanted to explore quickly. It was around procurement. In the current situation is large contracts, construction contracts in the UK. We are obliged to invite our European partners to come and have a go. I just wonder what your thoughts might be on, after Brexit, whether we might get a bit more of a closed shop in terms of procurement, and I don't know how that affects perhaps other apart from construction, your worlds in terms of other things you procure.
If you believe CIPS, the Chartered Institute of Purchase and Supply, this is the problem. There's no data. There's just surveys. But they have surveyed a whole bunch of, I think it's about the top 100 organisations, and 40% of them are saying, they are gearing up to move their operations overseas if the worst comes to the worst. So they're already starting to make plans and are investing money in that. So will the production of those things that we want be there? So you can't assume that they will. But equally, the same thing applies. Will the labour be there to do it? And will the service wrapper be there to provide the service? And at what cost? Because we don't know what impact on exchange rate. So if you look at the euro at the moment, actually we're on a bit of a rally, and this is great stuff. But if you're talking a construction project over a longer period of time, the conversations that you have with the bank about hedging and what's your strategy on hedging a currency on a project that runs over 2 to 3 years, quite frankly, nobody has a clue. So the near-term piece you could do, but the rest you're still going to leave exposed because it could flip the other way. Yeah.
It is, but I think we hedge extensively as a business because we have a lot of overseas supply, both into the UK and into other markets. And I think most prudent businesses, going back to your point, one of the reasons why any inflation's been delayed is because most businesses hedged. Most businesses do hedge. You saw the odd one which got caught out, but not many. Those hedges have gone now, most of them. But businesses have had a chance to adjust and decide what their strategy is going to be. Some people have raised prices, some people have held prices and taken a hit. But underlying, there is a cost inflation there on raw materials coming in. And how that plays out and how we manage that going forward will be very interesting. So you really got to look at the Bank of England and Mark Carney at the moment and see what he's thinking. A lot of it for us is confidence. As an individual level is, do you have the confidence to spend that money? So it's not at business level. The businesses will look after themselves. But it's all about consumer confidence now. I think that's what Mark Carney's hinting at the moment, which is that's where the issue is. So it's not necessarily the cost, it's confidence.
Yeah, and I guess the diversification of your risk and your exposure to certain currencies is one piece to consider. But even if you then think about the supply chain, so if you're heavily dependent on imported goods, as some retailers are, then you can look to other economies to, I guess, manage some of that risk. For example, is anyone from Laura Ashley in here? So their profits plummeted last year, largely because they were very heavily dependent on imported goods and they hadn't hedged any of their costs. So their profits fell from 22.8 million to 6 million on similar sales, which is that's a heavy burden. So this readiness thing is just be aware and maybe think about where your risks come from, but don't assume that you can buy the same thing here without the risk. I think that's a key thing.
I mean, the UK is still a large importer, so in terms of construction, the traditional packages of facades, UPSs, generators, still going to come from Central Europe. And there was already competition coming from China and Asia, so I don't think that's going to change. I think contractors still traditionally UK based, but certainly some of the packages will always come from Europe, and I can't see that changing, and they'll want to do business with us.
But it's lead times as well. Because the one thing that, again, nobody can really quite understand is what will the barriers to trade look like? So if you are importing a boatload of stuff from Europe, at the moment the stuff just sails through. But actually, if you've got the additional bureaucracy of administration, import paperwork, import duty processing and the like, and the volume of that going through the ports, can the ports cope with that? Well, at the moment the answer is probably no. But, you know, will they be ready? You know, we have time, but will they be ready? So again, I guess it's just understanding there could be risk to project timescales, particularly in construction. Yeah.
Any other thoughts from the floor? No.
Is no one worried about this? Everyone, or is it lunch?
I work in the City of London. I have done for about 30 years. I know I don't look here. But they always used to say, or somebody once said to me, you can always tell the way the construction industry is running by the amount of cranes you see. And I don't think I've seen so many cranes before in London. There's buildings going up left, right and centre everywhere. Both you, Gary and Jason, you hit the nail on the head with Y2K. You know, nobody knows, nobody can tell. But I'm a big believer in cycles of life. Now, in the 90s, you had massive construction problems. You know, that people were going into negative equity housing, and there was no Brexit then. It was just the way the economy was running at the time. And I'm just sceptical and thinking, well, is this just another cycle that we're going to go through at the moment?
I mean, that is my view. I think I'm obviously getting old. I started shouting at the news at 6 o'clock in the evening now, and for me, it's hype and a headline now. They attach they being the press, I think, attach the word Brexit to every single story that they report on. It seems, but I think in the background, as we've been saying here, you know, big business and small business are just getting on with it and preparing. I'm sure there will be some roadblocks, perhaps around some of the border control, some of the perhaps regulatory stuff, but I just don't see. I don't see there be the sort of problem that's being hyped up. So, two more down here.
I think for me, there's a lack of any focus on any possible positives as well. You talked earlier about procurement. Now, I mean, I've had to live within OG procurement requirements for a period of time. It was painful. Last time I looked, procurement rules have nothing to do with quality of price. It's just a process. So if we move away from that to some degree with a streamlined process, I don't think you're going to restrict the people that tender. You're just going to remove a certain level of that bureaucracy. I also hear a lot about shortage of labour, which is going to be true, but isn't that come about by a certain level of short-termism from the construction industry not wanting to train its own people when they can buy something cheaper from the European market, and now you've got the probability that they're actually going to have to start investing in their own training.
That is true. I think, you know, investment in training across the construction industry was almost non-existent for a number of years, because those trades could be brought in from outside, and I think probably a lot of those concerns around resource have been that's been hung on to Brexit because it's something else they can blame. When in fact you're right. I would say that the training industry has been woefully poor, and almost I think perhaps the Brexit situation has kick-started a lot of companies now going back into apprenticeships and so forth, which is great. So I think you're right. I think we just sort of started on a negative note. I think actually we should probably be positive about Brexit and stop blaming everything else on it. So you're going to...
Two things, I guess, is that if you want to succeed, you'll find a way. If you want to fail, you find a way. You know, dealing facts, nothing else. And there's also an opportunity to really refine and work and invest in the relationships you've got today, because you'll need them in the future. You'll need them in a different way, but they'll need us as well as we'll need them. So I still think there's time, and I just think, you know, if you want it to work, you'll find a way. There's been bigger issues than this to worry about, over decades.
It's a macroeconomic factor, isn't it? And the same as anything else. The good organisations will cope and manage and be prepared. It's not a new challenge. It's the same as any other challenge that's been over the years.
The bit that makes me really sort of look back, in recent times, is the whole financial crisis bit. The crisis was created by the media and the noise and everything around it. It created our own bloody mess, quite frankly. So we found a way out of it, and there's got to be, it's a different context clearly, but the truth is, there'll be a route through it. We've just got to make sure we find it, and we're focused on finding it.
And I think you're very right. The other key thing is, there's so much posturing going on from Europe and from the UK, but the bottom line is the UK is the 5th largest economy in the world. If we start damaging the UK economy, everybody gets in trouble worldwide. So do the EU really want that to happen? They can't afford for that to happen. So I think sense will come at the end of the day and they'll say, we cannot damage the UK economy. We've got to find a way of working.
I think in a similar way, the UK construction industry, is looked on around the world as being, the exemplar of how to build things. People out there doing things a bit smarter now. There's always, people catch up and overtake us on things, but we are exporting expertise. I know the BRE, for instance, are set up in China. The Chinese are taking all of our codes and legislation and standards now and are rolling them out seriously across China, not just sort of playing at it as they did perhaps 15, 20 years ago. So there's we often forget that how people look at the UK and the UK construction industry as being an exemplar of how to do it, which is good.
And UKFM as well, it's a lighthouse for the rest of the globe. Interestingly, 3 years ago the government kind of forced 16-year-olds to stay in education or go into apprenticeships. The following year they cut the funding to the training providers and swapped over to the colleges, so there was a lack of courses, a lack of training, and then they introduced obviously the apprenticeship levy. Within this room, how many people are actively recruiting apprentices within their functions?
Only just this year, though.
That's what I say. So there's some hope, yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Going back to the point on training and specifically apprenticeships, we've started to take on quite a lot of apprenticeships, mainly to start with to get our money back with the levy that we put in. But what we're finding is the earlier we can get them, the better, because the quality of what we're getting out of university is not 4 or 5 years in advance of where the apprentice would get to if we had them. And I think part of the message that we need to get across is it's not just an option for people that don't really think that they can go to university. Actually, it should be a positive choice to get into a career and get better training from a corporate as opposed to at university, because to be honest, what we can offer them is better than a lot of universities anyway.
It's interesting now that they're actually calling a day release degree an apprenticeship.
Yeah, it's not though, is it?
No, it's what half of the industry used to be grown out of.
Apprenticeships are not all 16-year-olds. You can be any age. You can apprentice COOs. There's an opportunity. I think what it does do is make sure we get people investing in themselves throughout their career.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say is that a lot of this is not new. No one would have dreamed to call someone who's employed getting day release to get their degree an apprentice. Now that's the way it's based up as part of scheme to get some of your levy money back.
Yeah.
Just train properly and deliver a quality product. And stop being short-termist, and we might actually have a chance.
And it's not just the trades either. I started life, and they called it indentureships then, when you went and worked for a company and you became a surveyor or whatever it was you wanted to do. But I know there are some of the big practices in London now are taking kids out of school at 17 and starting on the process. So it's not just the trades; it's some of the professions as well that they're getting in before the unis. Yeah, getting in before the universities, which is great.
Well, the big companies now, like Ernst Young and people like that, are now saying that a degree is not a prerequisite for an interview. So the creep has gone back the other way.
Yeah, it's all cycles.
But the problem we've got is who's gonna pass on the good. I mean, I consider myself enormously privileged to have served an apprenticeship with engineers who I don't see today. You know, the standard of the guys that trained me 30 odd years ago don't exist now. And that's the problem. Who is going to give the kids the standards and the things that they'll look back? I mean, we've all got it in our lives. You know, there'll be people, whether it's a driving instructor or someone that you met whose standards were, you know, not groundbreaking, but, you know, top of the tree. You know, and all of us at times, even when you're senior directors in big companies or what have you, we all get moments in time where we look back and think, Christ, crap's hit the fan, but I remember so-and-so saying that to me. And, you know, you hark back to the training you got given, and it gives you that sort of confidence to know that that's how John did it, that's right. You know, and those experienced personnel are just not around. Yeah, or they're fading off.
Well, it's Jason, yeah.
Jason, yeah.
That's also because we're still playing. Also because we're still playing at it. We're not giving it enough attention. If we're actually committed, other than certain larger companies, to full training programs with those people in place, we're just shoehorning it into the way we run our businesses anyway, and that doesn't yet fit because we're still working on the basis of getting university graduates in who should be at a level, or we expect to be at a level. If we worked on a basis that we would actively train people up through it, then it'd be different.
But even the universities know. I mean, my son and daughter are both at uni. My son's gone back to do a master's in politics, and my daughter has just got to do a history degree at Sheffield. And both of them at their schools did the EPQ programme, which is the Extended Project Qualification, which is basically started by Sheffield Uni. And the idea is that you have to identify a question, you have to go and find the answer, and you have to write a report and basically do a whole presentation on something which is your own work. Okay, and if you're doing history, it'll be on something on history. And the reason why the universities brought it in is because they were getting people through from A-levels who were just literally being taught how to go through a process. There was no independent thought going on. There was none of the skills, none of the life skills that university was supposed to be teaching them. And the material they were getting at university level was just people with the qualifications to get in the door, but incapable of being able to complete the degree. But the EPQ gives them that opportunity, but not every university does it.
I think we've given Paula enough ammunition for a whole separate session on apprenticeships and training in the industry going forward. So time's up, so I'm going to wrap it up there. And I'd just like to say thank you to David, Jason and Gareth for their inputs.